Good evening, everyone. Wish you a very happy new year and welcome back to this discussion on audit. So, I'm just hoping your new year celebrations went well. Yeah, and you are now back to this audit. Okay, so great. In the previous sessions, we have discussed about some of the special features of some types of entities. We have discussed about government entities. We have also discussed about local bodies, NGOs. Yeah. And in all of those cases, we have tried to analyze as to what is going to be different in terms of our discussion when it comes to audit of these types of entities. Yes or no? In all of those cases, we found that most of the things are going to be similar. Means, if we talk about the basic audit approach, so the basic audit approach is not going to change. Application of auditing standards has to be there everywhere, correct? Application of accounting principles by the entity needs to be taken care of by the auditor. Means whether that has been done or not. So that is also one of the things. So now for some of the entities, it could be some accounting standards or some other accounting practices. Yeah, but that is something which you expect for each and every organization. But there was a third part to it. And the third part was about legal regulatory requirements, which will vary from entity to entity and which cannot be similar. In fact, even if we talk about a company, that can vary from company to company depending on the nature of business is into, depending on the industry is it into. Now, that aspect is something which can change some of the requirements, or you can say which can require the auditor to look into those additional requirements over and above which the auditor will always be doing as far as audit is concerned. Yeah, and with which you can also associate the features of the entity of that particular organization. Yeah, now in this respect, we also discussed briefly about some of the legal requirements in respect of, say, NGOs, yeah, some of the local bodies, which is nothing but in a way extension of the government only, correct? So now the same approach we are going to continue. So today we are going to continue on this, and in the next session again we are going to continue on this. So the same thing we are going to continue, but every time we'll be picking up different type of entity. Yeah. So now what we will do is we'll just move on to another type of entity. In terms of that entity, we'll just try to understand once again what are the legal requirements, what are the regulatory requirements therein, what is the understanding to begin with as far as that entity is concerned, as far as the nature of their business is concerned. Because the moment you get to know about the nature of their business, you develop an understanding about their business. We have seen that the audit procedures, or to think of the audit procedures, become relatively simpler for us. Correct? So, with that thought process, we'll just move forward, right? Okay, so now I'll just pick up the next type, and there again, in the next type that I'm going to pick up now, there again, we'll see some of the legal requirements coming into picture, some of the regulatory requirements with which one will have to deal with. Okay. And during the day, we also plan to practice a bit more on something that we have already covered. You can say it's a sort of revision, and it's also a kind of test of whatever you would have covered so far, means whether you are revising that or not, whether you remember that or not. Okay, so that again we plan to cover today. All right, so now moving on to cooperative societies. Okay, so when we talk about audit of cooperative societies, I think we now understand, we'll have to first of all understand what a cooperative society is, how it works, under what regulatory framework it works. Okay, so let's spend some time on the understanding of a cooperative society. So, what is a cooperative society? So, we can also go literally by the terminology. So, it says cooperative societies. Yeah, so what do you mean by cooperative? So, it's a term, cooperative, coop, or corporation. So, you can say it's an autonomous association of persons. Means there are various persons who have come together voluntarily. Why? To meet their common economic, social, cultural needs and aspirations. And for that, what will they do? They will set up an entity or an enterprise which will be jointly owned by all of those persons. Correct? So that's how you will define a cooperative organization as. And if they set up a society, means if they register a society, then that is what you call as cooperative society. Correct? Now, Cooperative Societies Act. So there's an act. Pallavi is asking, is it like a joint venture? To a certain extent, I would say yes. Why? Because there are a lot of parties coming together for a purpose and wherein they are jointly owning that enterprise. Yes. To a certain extent, you can just try to relate this to joint venture. Okay. Now, Cooperative Societies Act 1912. Okay, so it's a central act, means it's coming through the center. It contains the fundamental law regarding the formation and working of cooperative societies in India. And it is also applicable in many states. Why? Because it's a central act. So we'll have to also check whether a state has a specific act or do they follow this particular act as it is, or do they require any changes? Means whether they have made some changes in the central act and then it is made applicable to them. Yes or no? Yeah. So what do you find that this has been made applicable in many states as it is, and in some of the states they have amended this and then they have applied this. Yeah. Now, an auditor of a cooperative society, he needs to understand this act. He needs to understand the provisions therein. Of course, why? Because if there is an organization, what is that organization? Cooperative society. Yeah. If you look at its formation, its working, only then you will be able to understand that. And what should be the legal framework within which it will be formed, it will be working, where does it come from, a particular act. So that's why an auditor need to have a knowledge of that. You can also think about it in a way that if let's suppose you were to audit a company, and if you as an auditor don't know the provisions of the Companies Act, so do you think you will be able to carry out audit of a company in an effective manner? What do you think? Do you think so? Dilip says no. Yeah. So same goes with a cooperative society or in a similar manner with any other organization. Understood? Yeah. Now, now, so if let's suppose there's a chartered accountant, so of course a chartered accountant can audit a cooperative society, plus some other professional services could also be rendered, and which is like quite generic. Huh? So be it books of accounts, internal audit, some of the advisory services, taxation, all of these services could also be provided. But that is not really the matter of our discussion right now. Okay. Now, If you look at the requirements of audit, so where do you go? Section 17 of this act. Which act is this? Cooperative Societies Act. So what does it require? It says a registrar shall cause. Now who is registrar? Registrar means a person who is registered or who is authorized under this particular act. Okay, so who is a registrar? So we are talking about a registrar who is a person acting as a registrar or who is authorized as a registrar under this particular act. So we are not talking about registrar of companies, we are talking about registrar of cooperative societies. Okay. Now this registrar shall audit or cause to be audited by some other person authorized by him. Okay. On whose behalf accounts of every registered society will be audited every year. And what does this audit include? Examination of overdue debts, if any, valuation of assets, liabilities of the society. Yeah. And if you look at the registrar, collector, all of them, they will have access to the books of accounts, any other record which they require. Why? For the purposes of this particular audit, for the purposes of the inspection which they plan to carry out. Yeah. So now let's try to understand the qualifications of an auditor. Now, please understand that currently we are talking about an audit which is not really the audit of financial statements. Now, this audit includes examination of overdue debts, valuation of assets and liabilities. So that means it's something which is of special nature. Correct? Now, for this particular audit, of course, a chartered accountant can audit this. Yeah. However, apart from a chartered accountant, some of the state cooperative acts. Now, which states are those? We don't know. Okay. And we don't need to get into that right now. So, some of the states have permitted persons holding a government diploma in cooperative accounts or in corporation and accountancy, and also a person who has served as auditor in cooperative department of a government. So they can also act as auditor. Okay, means it's not necessarily has to be a chartered accountant. It can be somebody else. Now, who is that? That is again defined. Ankit is asking, what do you mean by overdue debts? Overdue debt means, let's suppose you have taken a loan. Loan means borrowing. Say you go to a bank, you take a loan of rupees 1 crore. Correct? Now, what do you call debt for you? Okay. Now, if let's suppose you had an understanding with the bank that you will pay this every month, but you have not been making the payment. So what does it mean? It's not only due, but it's overdue. Understood? Yeah. So what do you mean by overdue debt? Means if there are debts which are overdue, which have gone beyond their due dates in terms of repayment. So that is what you call as overdue debt. Clear, Ankit? Yeah. Ankit, clear on this? All right. So now moving further. Appointment of the auditor. So qualifications we have discussed. So now an auditor of a cooperative society. Now please remember we are talking about a cooperative society under the Central Act, means Cooperative Societies Act. Who will appoint the auditor? We just discussed. A registrar will appoint. Okay. And the auditor who will be appointed will conduct the audit on behalf of registrar and submit his report to the registrar and also to the society. Because the registrar is appointing, so that's why the report will go to the society as well as to the registrar. So you can say similar to what you see in case of CAG. Remember CAG, when the auditor is appointed, so auditor submits the report to the company as well as to CAG. So same is the case over here. Clear? Yeah. Now, books of accounts, records of cooperative societies. Now, all of these will be driven by the rules of that particular act. For example, in Maharashtra, cooperative societies are required to maintain books of accounts in terms of instructions of registrar. So, what are the requirements in Maharashtra? So, these are some of the requirements. So, please remember this is not the only requirement or this is not an exhaustive list. This is only example. Means all sums of money received, expended by the society, matters in respect of which receipts and expenditures have taken place, all sales and purchases of goods, if any, by the society, assets, liabilities of the society. Yeah. So these are some of the records which are required to be maintained. Yeah. Now, this will again vary depending on the nature of the society, depending on the kind of activities it is involved into. Yeah. So different types of records it may be required to maintain. For example, cash sales summary register, collection from debtors, so a register for that. Okay, register of recovery of loans, if any, loan disbursement register. Again, it may vary specifically. Huh? Now, next part, I would say this is something which is more of legal requirement. So that's why it becomes important. Huh? Why? Because there could be some small questions based on this. Restrictions on shareholdings. Now, in case of a society where the liability of the member of society is limited, no member of a society other than a registered society can hold portion of share capital of the society as would exceed maximum of 20% of the total number of shares. Means if there is one member, what can he hold? Maximum 20% of the total number of shares. Or in terms of value, it should be rupees 1000. It should be 1000. Okay. Now, if you are the auditor, then of course you'll have to take care of this requirement. Why? Because for the members, where the society is ensuring this compliance, it becomes the duty of the auditor to look into this. Correct? Now, similarly, there's a restriction on the loan. Registered society shall not make a loan to any person other than a member. Yeah, so there is a restriction. Means society, if it wants, can it give a loan to any person? No. However, it can make a loan to another registered society. But for that, special sanction of the registrar will be required. Okay. Means approval of the registrar will be required. Similarly, there could be various other restrictions. Now, restrictions on borrowings. A registered society shall accept loans and deposits from persons who are not members, subject to the restrictions and limits which are there in the bylaws. Now, what do you mean by bylaws? Bylaws, you can say, is similar to what you call as memorandum or articles of association of a company. Okay, wherein the rules and regulations within which the society will operate are written down. Yeah. So now, if something is specified over there, okay, within that window or restricted to that, a society can accept loans or deposit from persons who are not members. Yeah. Now, if you were the auditor of a society, so what will you do? You will have to, of course, examine the bylaws. You will have to understand the bylaws. Only then you will be able to take care of these requirements. Yes or no? Yeah. Of course, if the management of the society is there, so they will be taking care of these requirements. There's no doubt about it. But as an auditor, you will also be doing that. Yeah. Okay. So Palvi is asking, sir, will the cooperative society prepare their financial statements as per Schedule 3? See, Schedule 3 comes from Companies Act. Okay. So therefore, Schedule 3 will only apply to those organizations, entities which fall within the purview of Companies Act. Please understand. Can we say that cooperative society gets covered under Companies Act? Tell me, Pallavi. Can we say that? No. The moment you say no, so this will not become applicable to them. Okay. Now for them, the format will have to come from somewhere else. It's not Schedule 3. Understood? Yeah. So every time, whenever you get stuck or say get confused, so think about it. Because it's something which is coming from Companies Act, so it will apply only to those who are covered under Companies Act. As simple as that. Shini is asking, sir, why there are so many restrictions imposed on cooperative society? Because some of these types of organizations, say for example, NGOs, say for example, cooperative society is there. Say for example, trust is there. Okay. Now their objective, their activities are not wide open. They are set up for a purpose to ensure that they are operating within those restrictions becomes important, so that they are moving around the purposes for which they are created. Otherwise, what will happen? They will get into a lot of things which may not be the real objective of setting them as a cooperative society. Yes or no? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Clear? Okay. Ritika is asking, can you give example name? See, example names are not specific. These are all something which you can go and register. Yeah. So it's not something which is a government organization. Yeah. So there could be various cooperative societies. Understood? All right. So now moving further. As regards the investment of funds, a society may invest its funds. Now here again there is a restriction. If let's suppose society has a surplus, let's suppose there's a bank balance of 10 crore. Okay. And the society wants to invest this. So society, a cooperative society cannot just go and invest anywhere. Say it wants to invest in the equity shares. Can it do that? The answer is no. So what are the restrictions? It can invest its funds in any one or more of only the following: in the central or state cooperative bank, in any of the securities which are specified in section 20 of Indian Trust Act, in the shares, securities, bonds, debentures of any other society with a limited liability, in any cooperative bank other than central or state cooperative bank, in any other monies permitted by central or state government. Okay. Now, every cooperative society will be required. So what is the requirement? A prescribed percentage of the profits which they generate should be transferred to a reserve fund. So that is what you call as appropriation. Appropriation, you understand. Under accounts, you know this, correct? So in the statement of P&L, you have this appropriation of funds, correct? So now every cooperative society, out of the profits which they generate, they will have to transfer a certain portion to reserves. Yeah, before they are distributing any dividend or bonus to their members. Now what is that percentage? We don't need to get into that, because that may again vary from the type of society it is. A registered society may, now please remember, only a registered society may means if it wants, with the sanction of the registrar, contribute an amount not exceeding 10% of the net profits remaining after compulsory transfer to reserve fund. So first of all, what will the cooperative society do? Transfer to reserves. Yeah. After that, the profits that are left, so maximum of 10% they can contribute for any charitable purpose, not beyond that. Yeah, so it should not happen that they are doing everything they are taking for the charitable purposes. No. Okay. Now, some of the state acts provide that a society may use the reserve fund. So the portion of profits which they take to reserve funds means the appropriation of the profits which they are doing. Yeah. So that reserve funds in some of the societies can be used in the business of the society as working capital, may be invested as per the provisions. Means this can also be invested, but you will have to go look into the act. May be used for some public purposes like to promote the object of society, means social causes. The auditor should ensure strict compliance with all of these rules, regulations. Okay. Now, some of the state acts provide that every society shall contribute annually towards education fund of the state federal society at an appropriate rate as per the class of the society. Now, if you contribute to this education fund, it's a charge on profits. Means this can be recorded as an expense. This will not be an appropriation. This is again the accounting requirement. Okay. Now here again, what do you see? You see there are a lot of provisions we have discussed. Yeah, there are a lot of provisions we have discussed. Now, if you were the auditor of a cooperative society, all of these provisions you'll have to remember. Yeah. So I would say this part that we have just discussed, you can make a note of this. So this is something which you will be required to memorize. Yes or no? Yeah. So there are a lot of parts in this chapter which I have discussed. You need to think logically. You can just apply your logics and design the auditing procedures around that. But when it comes to some of these regulations or these legal requirements, so therein, of course, if you want to draft that in terms of answering the questions, you can always use your language. But at least that knowledge has to be there. Okay. So that means you'll have to memorize all of those provisions. Okay. Clear? All right. So now special features of cooperative audit. So now let's talk about the audit requirements. So what do you mean by audit requirements? So there are a lot of provisions that we have already looked at. So as an auditor, will you go and check whether the cooperative society has taken care of all of those provisions? The answer is of course yes. Okay. So as an auditor, you will always go check that. Okay. So that is of course one of the requirements for you being the auditor of a cooperative society. Okay. But there are a lot of other things which an auditor needs to do. So let's try to look into that aspect as well. Okay. So now, what are those special features which you need to keep in mind? So one, overdue debts. So when we started understanding about the cooperative society, I think one of the first point which came across was examination of overdue debts. Yes or no? And that is definitely a part of audit which you'll do anyways in case of any other organization, but because this is sale, this is very specifically focused upon. So that's why whenever you will be talking about features of audit of a cooperative society, so it has to be there. Yeah, so it has to be there. So what does it mean? So let's understand the legal requirements around this. Overdue debts for a period from 6 months to 5 years means overdue debts which are 6 months old up to 5 years old and which are more than 5 years old will have to be classified and shall have to be reported by an auditor. Yeah, so the auditor will have to check that in terms of their classification, whether that has been done appropriately by the cooperative society or not. And the auditor will also be required to report that. Now, these overdue debts have far reaching consequences. Of course, see, if the debts are overdue for such a significant period of time, so definitely it's not something which is good. Yes or no? A further analysis of these overdue debts from the viewpoint of chances of recovery will have to be made, and they will have to be classified as good or bad. Okay. Now, in terms of overdue debts that we are discussing right now, are those debts which the society has given to others. Okay, so for a society, these debts are nothing but an asset. So that's why they will have to be classified as good or bad. Good or bad. Why? Because accordingly, auditor will have to look into the appropriate provisions. Why? Because of some of those are not good, they are doubtful or bad. So what does it mean? A provision should be created for that. Yeah. And if that is already created or not created, whatever be the case, so that is something which the auditor will have to go look into it. Correct? Now, overdue interest. So if you have overdue debt, so of course interest will also be there. Now, overdue interest should be excluded from interest outstanding and accrued due while calculating profits. Overdue interest is the interest accrued or accruing in accounts, the amount of which the principal is overdue. In practice, an overdue interest reserve is created and the credit of overdue interest is credited to interest account is reduced. Means when you will go look at the profits, so you will exclude this part and then you will analyze the profits. Certification of bad debts. Bad debts can be written off only when they are certified as bad by the auditor. So it's one of the peculiar features which you see in case of some of the societies. Like for example, it's given Maharashtra State Cooperative Rules 1961. So they require that till the time auditor will not certify that, it will not be considered as bad. So bad debts and irrecoverable losses before being written off against bad debt funds should be certified. So whose responsibility is that? Auditor will have to do that. So there again, you can see that all of these points that we have been discussing, they appear to be the striking features of cooperative societies. Yeah, so that's why it's very, very important to memorize these points. So you can always remember these keywords or the pointers. Of course, you can elaborate that. So I'm not saying that you need to mug up this entire para or all of these provisions. No, I'm saying you need to just memorize these pointers so that if the question requires you to answer, so you will not be very generic in terms of audit. You will be very specific in terms of these features of the audit. Understood? Yeah. Because unlike some of the organizations wherein you will be able to think through, you will not be able to do that in case of cooperative society. Understood? Yeah. So you can say it's quite similar to what we have seen in case of government audit, quite similar to what we have seen in case of local bodies. Yeah. That's why, and that's one of the reasons why I picked up cooperative societies now. Understood? Yeah. So these are some of the things wherein some pointers you'll have to memorize. Okay. Next, valuation of assets and liabilities. Now, this is again slightly different from what you get to see in case of audit. Now, auditor will have to ascertain existence, ownership, and valuation of assets. So we are talking about certain assertions which are required to be audited. Now, fixed assets, how do you value them? Cost less depreciation. Incidental expenses which are incurred on acquisition or installation, they will be capitalized. Okay, so over here, the accounting principles have been discussed first. So if there is a difference in original cost of acquisition and present market price, a note regarding present market value may be appended. Yeah. So you can correlate this to the impairment requirements. The current assets need to be valued at cost or market price, whichever is lower. Regarding the liabilities, auditor will have to see that all the liabilities have been recognized. Okay. And the contingent liabilities have been disclosed. Now, here you can say in respect of valuation of assets and liabilities, some of the things are generic. But if you look at the current assets, they are required to be valued at cost or market price, whichever is lower. Yeah. So this seems to be slightly different in terms of its accounting requirement, which you don't get to see in case of accounting standards. Yeah. So where does this requirement come from? The act. So whatever act requires, cooperative societies will have to do that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Ankit is saying, can you please explain point number 4? Yeah. So this is about valuation only. Yeah. See, in case of valuation of assets and liabilities, society will recognize that. So fixed assets, auditor will go audit. How do you measure that? If you are a cooperative society, cost less depreciation. Okay. If there are current assets, now this is different. So that's why you need to remember this point. Cost or market price, whichever is lower. As far as liabilities or contingent liabilities are concerned, they are having the same principle. Why? Because as regards their measurement, nothing different is specified. So it just need to ensure that they have been recognized appropriately and the contingent liabilities have been disclosed appropriately. Okay, clear? Srini is asking, sir, what do you mean by current assets here? Now see, current assets here have not been specified. Yeah. So therefore, you will have to understand that any of the assets, sorry, any of the current assets, for example, inventory is nothing but a current asset. Debtor is nothing but a current asset. Yeah. So all of those current assets that you understand to be current assets are something which are covered over here because specific list is not given. So that's why in the exam again, you will not have to get into the specific list. Okay, clear? Ankit is saying not this one, sir. Point number 4 as per section 17. As per section 17. Where is that section 17? Are you talking about any different point? This okay. No worries. So what I'll do is let me just get done with this. Then I'll come back because I think we'll just digress from our discussion now. I'll come back to that. Adherence to cooperative principles. Now auditor will have to again ascertain what that how far the objectives for which the cooperative organization is set up are achieved. Means whether the cooperative society is working in lines with the objectives for which it is set up or not. Yeah. So we are talking about the activities at large. Means every cooperative society will have a purpose. So they will have a set of activities which are defined. Okay. And where are those going to be defined in terms of the bylaws? For example, I talked about memorandum and articles, which you can correlate to this. Yeah. So therefore, auditor will have to ensure that the society is moving in the same direction for which it was set up. Yeah. So that becomes the responsibility of the auditor. Okay. Provisions of the act. Now there are various provisions of the act. What are the provisions of the act? We just discussed. which in fact Ankit has also asked me that section 17.4. Yeah, similarly, there were so many points. Now, we also discussed that this Cooperative Society Act, with or without amendments, is going to be applicable. Yeah. So, whatever provisions are involved in that act, who will have to ensure that? Of course, society. But auditor also needs to check that whether the society is doing that or not. Yeah, that's what the role of the auditor is. Yes or no? Yeah. So all of those provisions will get covered over here. Okay. Now, society will have a lot of members. There's no doubt about it. Now, society is what? In a very simple terms, you can say it's an association of various members. So there can be hundreds of members in a society. Correct? Who basically own the society, or you can say who run the society. Correct? Now, examination of entries in the members' passbooks. So, members' registers will be prepared. Yeah. So, some of them may have taken loan, some of them may have given loan. So, confirmation of loan balances, all of these things, this needs to be ensured. So, auditor needs to perform this task. If you look at rural and agricultural credit societies, specifically, members are not literate, means they are not educated enough. And as such, it's a good safeguard. Why? Because it may have happened that some of the loans they have given, they are not getting repaid, their balances are not specified. Yeah. So some of those wrong things are not taking place. So who has the responsibility to ensure this? So it's been placed on the auditor. Auditor needs to ensure this. Auditor needs to take care of this. Okay. During the course of audit, if the auditor notices there are some serious irregularities in respect of working of the society, so what will the auditor do? Report to the registrar. Report to the registrar. Okay. And the registrar will make a special report. Will make a note of that. And accordingly may decide the course of action. What does he need to do in such a case? In the following cases, for instance, a special report may become necessary when, let's suppose, members are working for their personal profits, which are detrimental to the interest of the society. Let's suppose there's a fraud. Yeah, there's a mismanagement. Society is not working towards its objectives. Disproportionate advances, for example, there are urban cooperative banks. So disproportionate advances have been given, let's suppose, to some vested groups just to benefit them. Yeah. So again, a kind of fraud. So if in case these frauds or irregularities are found, so what will do? Sorry, what will the auditor do? Auditor will report this. May be required to prepare a special report. Yeah. So it's a kind of report only. And so that the registrar can look into the course of action on the basis of that. Okay. Now, after a judgment of an overall performance of the society, what will the auditor do? Auditor has to award a class to the society. Means some sort of rating, you can say, a feedback a category will be given to the society. Yeah. On the basis of the criteria which registrar will specify. Again, all of these things come from the rules and regulations. On the conclusion of the audit, auditor shall ask the secretary to the society. Secretary, you can say, like company secretary is there. Similarly, there is a secretary to the society who will convene the meeting of management committee. Management committee, you can say, is similar to board of directors. Management committee, okay, wherein the draft audit report will be discussed. Audit report should never be finalized without a discussion with the management committee. Of course, it's similar to what you see in case of a company. So audit report is first discussed with the board of directors and then it is finalized. Okay. Yeah. All right. So now Ritika is asking, sir, what do you mean by vested group? Vested group, let's suppose, say there's a cooperative bank. Okay. Now you can say there's a section of people whom that particular bank favors. Favors in a way that some of the loans have been given to that section of people, or you can say to a particular person. Those similar types of loans were not sanctioned for anyone else, but for those persons, those were sanctioned. Okay, so that is what you say, those who are favored, towards which there is a bias. So that's what you say, there's a vested group. Understood? Who are given undue advantage. Clear? Manvi is asking, what is the meaning of infringement? Infringement means a kind of breach is there. Ritika is saying, who are given special treatments? Yes, you can say that. Yeah. Pallavi is asking about overdue interest point. Overdue interest point. Again, you're taking me back to the provisions. Okay, so let me just go back to the provisions so I can see a couple of queries coming in. So one was, I think, on this point, a restriction on shareholding. So let's quickly discuss this. So it says a society, in case of a society, no member of a society can hold. So in case of society, what will happen? There will be a lot of members. They will own the shares of the society. So now for the members, there is a capping. What is the capping? If a society is there wherein the liability of the member is limited, then every member can maximum have 20% of total shares. So let's suppose there are 1 lakh shares. Okay. So one member can have maximum 20,000 shares. So in terms of number, or if you look at the value, so this value should not exceed 1,000. Yeah. So that's the capping. And auditor will have to ensure this. Okay. Auditor will have to ensure this. Kambeshwari is asking, arithmetical accuracy means? Arithmetical accuracy, you can say any computational mistake. Okay. Addition, deletion, division, all of these things, whether these are done in an appropriate manner. Okay. Yeah. Clear? Okay. Then I think there's a point, next one, overdue interest. So let me just go back to overdue interest. So what was the point on overdue interest? I think that was under audit only, isn't it? It's now on overdue interest. Now, overdue interest should be excluded from interest outstanding and accrued due. So now it says that when you calculate your profits, so society will prepare the accounts. Now, in those accounts, any overdue interest you will exclude. Okay, you will exclude, and then you will calculate your profit. Okay. In practice, an overdue interest reserve is created. So what do you do that? It will be taken to a reserve. Okay, it will be taken to a reserve. So that's the practice which is followed. So that is something which the society should have done in terms of its accounting requirements. You can say it's a specific accounting requirement, and which the auditor needs to ensure. Clear? Clear? Ritika is asking, sir, interest will be the earnings in this case? See, of course, we are talking about overdue debts. Yeah. No, that's the requirement. I think some of you have this requirement. Why is this created? See, it's the requirement of the act. Yeah. So they are required to treat this. Ankit is asking what could be a sales item in case of a cooperative society. See, that will again depend on the nature of their business. Okay. The nature of business which they will have. Then I think there are a lot of questions you are asking, which is all about understanding of some of the words. Adherence means compliance. Adherence means compliance, means to comply with that. That's the meaning. Huh? Okay, clear? Yeah. Any more questions quickly? Ritika, clear? Great. No? All right. So now, moving further. So there was an act, Cooperative Societies Act, correct? Now, similarly, there is another act. So far, the discussion we have had was all about the cooperative societies. Ritika, let's move further. I'll come to all of these words later on. Maybe we can just. I would advise for you pick up one dictionary. Yeah, you'll just quickly get answers to all of these things. Otherwise, we'll just remain distracted on all of these words. Okay, or otherwise you can just keep doing Google in between. That will help you. Fine. Or maybe towards the end you can just put across all the words. I'll answer. Right? Okay. All right. So now this Shini is asking, so topic is new for us, and that's why slightly difficult to understand. See, in this chapter, as we discussed, there are certain types of organizations. For example, government, local bodies, or government entities, wherein some of the provisions, some of the features, you can say the rules and regulations which are applicable to them are slightly different. Slightly different in the sense they are in addition to what you generally get to see. Okay, which of course is new, and that's why it's important for you to memorize. So I can understand some of these things are going to be new for you. Yeah. So what you should try to do. So I would say your endeavor in the session should be to try and understand about the type of entity. Let's not focus much on how you will be able to remember all of these provisions. Okay, because your thought process could be, so there are so many provisions, how do we remember? We'll forget that, isn't it? So is this thing bothering you right now? Yeah, you may be thinking, sir, in case of government audit there were so many points, in case of local bodies there were so many points, and here again there are so many provisions, so how do we remember that? Is that the thing which is bothering you? Tell me quickly, please confirm, everyone. Palvi is saying yes. What about others? Is that the thing which is bothering you? Yeah, Shrini is saying yes. Tambeshwari is saying yes. Okay. Now, to answer that question and to help you on that, I would just advise one point that currently in the session, you should not worry much about these provisions in terms of their technicality. Okay, forget about their technicality. Just try to understand how the particular entity that we are discussing really functions. For example, local bodies, how do they work? What are local bodies? Similarly, cooperative society, How do they work? How do they function? Similarly, NGOs, how do they function? Just try to get more and more understanding of that particular type of entity. Alongside, you will also be going through the provisions, rules and regulations that we have been discussing. Yeah. Once you are able to get on to that understanding, what you will find is, or I should say that once you are confident in terms of your understanding of that particular entity, okay, whenever you reach that situation, maybe in today's session, or maybe after today's session when you revise it, or maybe after two revisions, yeah, the moment you will say that, sir, my understanding of this type of entity is now thorough. I'm only talking about understanding. You will find that most of these provisions you will start remembering automatically. Yeah? Because some of these provisions will be attached to their understanding. Okay. And after that, some of the provisions which you are not able to remember, of course, there's no choice. You'll have to mug up. You'll have to cram that. And this is no different from what you see in case of company law. Yes or no? So there are Companies Act, companies laws. You're doing that or not? So there again, some of the things you will memorize. If you go back to accounting standards, some of the provisions, some of the paras you'll remember, some of the accounting treatments you'll memorize, you'll understand, but you'll have to memorize that or not. So same goes over here. Okay, so currently don't worry that there are too many points. Too many points will automatically be narrowed down, and each and every point is not going to be asked. Okay, and it's not going to happen that each and every pointer you'll have to explain. So let's suppose if the audit or some of the features of cooperative society are required to be answered in the examination, so you'll not have to answer all of these 10 points or 12 points. Maybe 3 4 points should be good enough. Okay, yeah. So let's not worry about that aspect right now, because if you keep worrying about that, so you will get distracted and you will not be able to focus much. Yeah, so that's the uh, approach I would say you should consider right now, and accordingly try to target this. Okay, now moving further, now there is another act that we are picking up. So we are still on the cooperative society. Yeah? Please remember that we are not yet done with cooperative societies. There was a category of societies which was registered under Cooperative Society Act. Similarly, there is another act. What is that? Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act. Okay, so this is another act. So now we will talk about this act, or you can say cooperative societies which are registered under this particular act. Okay, now I had a question in between, that what do you mean by multi-state? So I'll come to all of these points. Okay, we have not yet started. Yeah, now this act applies to cooperative societies whose objects are not confined to one state. So what do you mean by this? Means if there is a society which is registered under Cooperative Society Act, say in Maharashtra, so what will happen? Its objects will be limited to only that particular state. So that's how that society will be registered. Or you can say it will be involved in those activities which will be limited to that particular state. Yeah. If it is not limited to a particular state, means it is not limited by one state. It can go beyond states. That is when this particular act will come into picture. Okay. Now, this act, therefore, you can say all of those societies will have to get registered under this act and not the act that we have covered before. Yeah. Now, this act contains provisions regarding registration, membership, management. So each and everything for these types of societies will have to be different from the one that we have covered, right? Now, let's try to understand some of the features which are involved in this. Now, these types of societies, they will have to maintain their books of accounts with respect to what? It's all general. Sales, purchases, assets, liabilities, money which they receive, money which they spend, all of this stuff. which is no different from what you find in case of any other entity. I'm not talking about any other society, any other entity. So you can say this part is quite generic for you. This is nothing new. Yeah. So this is not new. This is all very generic. Clear? Now, in fact, in case of multi-state cooperative society, so many provisions, so many audit requirements that you will read, you will find them quite generic in nature. So what do I mean by generic? By generic, I mean to say, which you will find in case of any other audit or any other organization. Remember in the previous session, we talked about it, that every time you see an entity, if you just understand the entity, will you be able to design the audit procedures around it? Will you be able to think about the audit requirements around it? So that is what you will see very, very commonly applicable. So I'm saying this approach you can apply in case of multi-state cooperative society. If you talk about Cooperative Society Act that we covered, therein there were a lot of specific features. Their rules and regulations were quite specific. But over here, you will find this to be quite generic. Okay, so let's understand and let's read. So automatically you'll be able to understand. Now, qualifications of the audit. Now, who will be an auditor? Chartered accountant. Only a chartered accountant can be appointed. Okay, and he has to be the one who is not disqualified. Remember, in case of a company, how does an auditor get disqualified? If it's a body corporate, officer or employee of that particular entity, yeah. If a person who is a member, who is in employment of an officer or employee of multi-state cooperative society. So all those disqualifications which you see in case of company, same are given for multi-state cooperative society. Remember these quickly, huh? Remember some of these disqualifications you see in case of companies. Yeah. So these are same. Yeah. So if you are making notes or if you are preparing summaries, then I would advise that some of these things you should mark. Okay. So at the time of exam, this will help you quite a lot. Why? Because the moment you will move on to this particular section, when you will want to revise this, you should just simply mark that this is general, this is generic. Okay. So everywhere you will find this is quite generic. You will not have to read that. Why? Because you'll understand that, okay, so this is something I have already covered. Why? Because I have already covered a lot of other entities and this is quite similar to that. So that's how you will get more confident and you will also be saving time in terms of revision. Okay. So I would say if you want, you can also follow this type of approach for the purposes of your revision later on. Okay. Up to you again. Appointment of auditors. First auditor or the other auditors shall be appointed by the board. Now, which board is this? Is this the board of director? No, it's the board of society. It's the board of society. Okay. If the board fails to exercise its powers, then the society in general meeting. Now, same thing which you see in case of company, correct? Subsequent auditor are appointed at each AGM. And the auditor shall hold office till the conclusion of next AGM. Exactly similar to what you see in case of company. Yeah. The only thing is that 5 years rotation provision is not given. That's it. Correct. Then, if you talk about powers and duties of auditor, now they are again similar to what you see in case of any other entity or a company. Yeah. Now, every auditor shall have a right to access the books of accounts, whether those are kept at head office or elsewhere. They will be entitled to require from officers or other employees of society any other information, explanation, which he may think necessary. So don't you find this thing in case of a company? Tell me quickly, huh? Don't you find so many things which are similar? Pallavi is asking, sir, will the auditor change year on year? See, it's not about auditor changing year on year. Auditor may be kept same, but auditor will have to be reappointed every year. Yeah. And in this case, in so many points about multi-state cooperative society, don't you find so many points we have covered, but they are all same? Yeah. The moment we would have started multi-state cooperative society, there was a concern in your mind. What was the concern? Sir, how many points will I have to remember? How many points will I have to memorize? All of these things, it's too difficult. Yes or no? That was bothering you. And that's where this multi-state cooperative society has come. Yeah, which is quite generic. Understood? Yeah. So every time you'll find something difficult, a lot of easy things will come. Okay, so that it's balanced out. Yeah. Then auditor shall make inquiries whether loans and advances made by the society are on the basis of security. Exactly similar to what you see in case of company. Whether the transactions are represented merely by book entries. Exactly similar to what you see in case of a company. Whether the personal expenses have been charged to P&L. Where it is stated in the books and papers of society that any shares have been allotted for cash, whether cash has actually been received or not. Yeah. So each and everything which is written is exactly similar. Yeah. Now, content of the auditor's report. Auditor shall make a report to whom? Members of society. On every balance sheet, P&L, and every other document which is put across. Yeah. And what will he do? He will give his opinion regarding truth and fairness in case of balance sheet of the state of affairs, in case of P&L of the profitability. There again, if you look at the contents of the audit report, are these any different? Yeah, there are a lot of points around the audit report, and there are so many points around the audit report that we had discussed. Yeah. Don't you think this is similar? Nitin is saying it's similar, sir. We can correlate. Yes. So that should be the approach. And that is where you should put across a mark to this. Okay. So that later on, at the time of revision, you can save time on some of these things. Okay. Now, moving further. Powers of central government to direct special audit in certain cases. Now, what are those special cases wherein the central government may direct a special audit to be carried out for a multi-state cooperative society? So there was one audit that we have discussed. Who will be the auditor? What will be the qualifications? Who will appoint the auditor? What will the auditor do? The reporting requirements of auditor. Okay, all of those things we have covered. So now we are saying over and above that audit, a special type of audit may be required in some cases. Yeah. Now, let's try to understand under what situations a special audit may be required. Now, this again is no different from what you see in case of companies. So it says where the central government is of the opinion that affairs of society are not being managed in accordance with self-help, mutual deed, cooperative principles, or prudent commercial practices, or sound business principles. Means, in very simple terms, there are irregularities. It's not working towards the objects for which it's set up. Or that the society is being managed in a manner likely to cause serious injury or damage to the interests of trade industry or business, or financial position of the society is such that its solvency is endangered, means it may become insolvent very soon. So in these three situations, Means in either of these three situations, central government may require a special audit to be carried out. Now, please understand that this special audit is over and above the audit that we have just discussed. Yeah, over and above the audit that we have just discussed. Now, if let's suppose there is any of these situations, so what will the central government do? Central government may order that a special audit be carried out. Yeah, for which it may appoint either a chartered accountant, means any other CA, or the auditor of that society himself. So there will be an auditor. So either the same auditor will be asked to do special audit, or another auditor may be appointed, means another chartered accountant may be appointed for special audit. Okay. Now, central government shall order for special audit only if that government, means central government or the state government, either by itself or both, they hold 51% or more of paid up share capital in the society. Okay. So only for those societies where the government holding is 51% or more, this special audit may be required. Means for each and every multi-state cooperative society, this special audit cannot be ordered. Means only those which are within the control of government, therein it can be ordered. Yeah. Special auditor shall have the powers, duties in relation to special audit as an auditor himself. Means he will have similar powers which will be there with auditor. Means he'll have to make inquiries, he can ask for any information which he believes is important for the purposes of his audit. Yeah. On receipt of report of special auditor, now the special auditor will give the report to the central government. So once that report is received, central government may decide the course of action. Means what do they want to do? So they will have to decide. Yeah. If the central government doesn't take any action on the report within 4 months from the date of receipt, government shall send to society either a copy of or the relevant extract from the report thereon, and require the society either to circulate that copy or the extract to the members. Okay. Expenses which are pertaining to special audit shall be determined by central government. Okay. Means who will decide the audit fee? It will be central government. So they will decide that audit fee. Yeah. Okay. Now, there was one provision of special audit in case of multi-state cooperative societies. Similarly, there is another provision now. Now, what is that provision? That provision is of inquiry. Okay. So what is this inquiry? So let's try to understand this provision. The central registrar may, on a request from federal cooperative to which multi-state cooperative society is affiliated, or creditor, or not less than 1/3 of the members of the board, or not less than 1/5 of total number of members of the society. Okay. So if either of these persons make a request to the central registrar, central registrar means the registrar who is registered under Multi-State Cooperative Society Act. Okay. So let's suppose either of these persons reach out to the registrar for a request. What is the request for? The request to hold an inquiry or direct some person authorized by him by order in writing in his behalf to hold an inquiry into the constitutions, working and financial conditions. So you can say For a specific purpose, some inquiries may be ordered. Yeah. However, before holding such inquiry, 15 days notice must be given to the society. Okay, so the society must be given notice that why is this inquiry being conducted. Yeah. Central registrar or the person who is authorized by central registrar, they will have the following parts in respect of inquiry. One, free access to the books, records, any other information which they require. Yeah. He may require the officers of the society to call a general meeting, to consider such matters as may be directed to him. And where the officers of the society refuse or fail to call such a meeting, so the central registrar can himself call a general meeting. Okay. He may summon any person who is reasonably believed by him to have any knowledge of the affairs. So he may call upon any person, ask for any questions, any information that he requires. Okay. Means an inquiry will be conducted. Inquiry could be in relation to any specific matter. Okay. Now you may be thinking, sir, why would such type of inquiries be conducted? See, whenever any fraud is there or a fraud is suspected, generally, so that is when these inquiries are conducted. Okay. Central registrar shall, within a period of 3 months of the date of receipt of report, communicate the report of inquiry to the society, financial institutions, if any, to which the society is affiliated, or maybe any other person who are attached to the society. Okay. So the time frame is also specified within which they will communicate the report, the final outcome of this inquiry. Yeah. So now please remember, in case of multi-state cooperative society act, or in these types of societies, there is one provision related to special audit. Second provision is related to inquiry. There is another provision which is related to inspection. Yeah. So there are three, you can say, some sort of specific provisions. Yeah. Now, let's try to understand what is this provision related to inspection. The central registrar may, on a request from, now again, these category of persons may request. The request will be made to whom? Central registrar. Now, earlier, the request was made for inquiry. Remember, earlier, in this case, under section 78, the request was made for inquiry. Now, under section 79, what would they request? They would request for inspection. Okay, which will be then ordered upon by central registrar. Okay, to perform that inspection. So this inspection will again be around constitution, working, financial condition. Here again, the opportunity of being heard will be given. So notice of 15 days will be given. Now, what are the powers which are available? Here again, a similar powers will be given. Okay. And this inspection report, again, there's a time frame of 3 months. Okay. So now, as around this inquiry and the inspection, all of these provisions, in fact, what do you find? They are quite similar. Yes or no? They are quite similar. So that's how you should just try to link these 2 points. Yeah? Understood? So you should try to link these 2 points. Now, Nitin is saying same, but for yes. So that's how you should save time. Okay? You should try to link this. You will be able to memorize both by doing only one. Of course, your language could be slightly different. Huh? Now, some of you may have a question. Sir, why there are 2 provisions? One for inspection, second one for inquiry. And what is going to be different in this case? See, the different, I would say, in these two cases will be the extent of checking. That will also depend on the uh, matter which is involved, means how big or small is the matter, and what is it that is being targeted, or means through the inquiry only if that objective will be achieved, or will it require any inspection, because I would say inspection is something which will be wider in scope as compared to only the inquiry. Yeah, so that is something which you should also consider. Clear? Yeah. All right, so now I think we have one question which is based on this, so let's try to look into this question. Yeah. Okay, over to you. Yeah, so you need to answer this, huh? Everyone ready? Yeah. A society has been formed by pan India employees, obviously, of a public sector bank. So there's a bank, public sector bank, there are employees, they have formed a society. The purpose of society is what? To promote savings habits of members and to grant loan to them up to a specified amount. So that's the purpose for which it's been set up. Okay. Small savings are promoted amongst the members by way of compulsory contribution from monthly salary. So in a way, what will happen? Every member will have to contribute. So they will have to save from their salary. Through the salary savings which they will do, they will have to contribute to the society. And later on, any member, if they need some funds, they can reach out to the society and society will help them. So that is generally the objective of the society. Now, in this case, there are two questions for you. And I would say these are very, very simple questions. And this is something which you should also expect in the exam. And you should also try to understand that how simple, easy questions are going to be in the exam. Okay, so most of you are worried right now that there are so many provisions, there are so many laws, regulations. How do we remember? But let's try to understand that so simple questions are going to be asked. Okay, so let's understand the question. Identify the type of society. What does it mean? Will it be a multi-state cooperative society or a cooperative society? That's the first question. And also discuss the nature of books of accounts which will be required to be maintained by such a society. Simple. Yes or no? Over to you now. Yes, quickly. Over to you. Over to you, quickly. Great. So I think everyone is answering. Yeah, to my surprise. But that's how you should expect the questions to be like. Very good. So Neeru says cooperative society. Tambeshwari says cooperative society. Ankit says multi-state. Why? Because Ankit is saying it's involving the employees. Now please try to understand. Okay. Now in this case, let's try to understand this. Okay, so I've actually taken you to the solution. In this case, all the members of the society, where are they from? They are from pan India basis, means they are from multiple states, correct? Can we say that the objective of the society will be limited to only one state? What do you think? Quickly. Can we say that the objective of the society will be limited to only one state? No. Yeah. So some of you who are answering Cooperative Society Act, yeah, so that's how you need to analyze this. Remember, a very, very simple point. So forget the provisions or forget the laws and regulations. Multi-state cooperative society. What does it mean? It involves multiple states, members from them. Their objectives are not limited to one state. So that's why what type of society it has to be? It has to be multi-state cooperative society. Why? Because it serves the interests of members in more than one state. As simple as that. Yeah. So there were two questions to be answered, and one question you have answered just by simply writing this one sentence. Okay. And the second question, I think, which is easier than the first one. What was that? What are the books of accounts you will maintain for that? Yeah. So can't you think about it? Of course, the books of accounts should involve receipts, payments, expenses, income, assets, liabilities, all of those records. Yes or no? Yes or no? Yeah? Clear? Everyone? So I can see this response coming from Nancy. Very good. Yeah. Nitin. Very good. Yeah. So this is what you should expect. Huh? And every time the things are not going to be complicated the way you think or the way you believe they are going to be complicated. Okay. Things are going to be easier. The only thing is you need to just flip through everything. Huh? Okay. So let's try to think of a question in the exam. If let's suppose you just simply don't read this provision, or you read, or you ignore reading this section. You think that this is too technical, I'll not read this. Let's not waste time. And there's a question in the exam. As simple as that. Yeah. So you can understand the importance of reading. Understood? Yeah. All right, great. So now I think we have just stretched this slightly. So let's take a break now. We'll continue our discussion. Okay, remaining discussion after the break. Okay. Yeah. So Manish, we can take a break now. Okay. Hi, welcome back. So now what we will do is before we move further, okay, we'll discuss one case scenario. Excuse me. Excuse me. So let me just move to this case scenario. Okay, now in this case scenario, we'll just try to analyze some of the situations that we have discussed, some of the provisions that we have looked at. Yeah, and then we'll move further on to some different types of entities. All right, so let's look at this. If you want, you can just also refer the study material. Up to you. Huh? So if you want to refer the study material, this is page 9.80. Okay. Yeah. You are given 5 descriptions. Okay. Audit of implementation of Nagpur Metro Rail project was conducted by CAG. Following is the extract of few audit findings which are placed on website cag.gov.in. Okay. Now, location of new airport station was not ideal from the viewpoint of ridership due to sparse population in and around the station and also the accessibility point of view. Cotton Market Station, the second additional station, was projected to have high peak hour, peak direction trips, but the work was kept on hold midway, citing fund crunch due to known release of pending contribution from stakeholders. However, the situation could have been managed through prioritization of works. Okay, now in this case, so we are talking about this particular finding of CAG. Yeah, so the question which is there for you, and please don't look at the solution. Please try to apply your thoughts. If you don't remember, don't worry. Just try to apply the logic which could be involved in this. Based upon the plain reading of audit findings, which are stated in first para that we just discussed. Identify the type of audit which is carried out by CAG. Means which type of audit would have been carried out wherein this audit finding would have been given. Do you think this would have been audit against provision of funds, propriety audit, performance audit, or compliance audit? Over to you. Okay, Sainath says B. Nitin, Malu, they are saying C. Nitin, I think, is saying performance audit. Okay, what about others? Okay, no worries. A, B, C, D, anything you can say. Shini says C. What about others? Quickly. What about others? Bhaskar says C. What about others? Quickly, everyone. Huh? Tambeshwari says B. Anjali says B. Okay, what about others? Quickly. Dilip also says B. Pallavi says C. Neeru says B. Ankit says B. Okay, what about others? Now, in this case, let me just do one thing. Let me just go back. Location was not idle. Remember performance audit? What does it require? 3 E's: effectiveness, efficiency, economy. Yeah. So don't you think that in the audit finding that you are looking at, there is a deficiency around the performance? Yes or no? There is a deficiency around the performance. Yeah. Correct. So that's why what should be the correct option? Performance. Okay. Let's look at the second one. Another set of audit findings in respect of Audit of Haryana Power Generation Corporation Limited, a wholly owned government company responsible for operation of power generation plants in state of Haryana is as under. So it's about a government company. The main reason for low generation was higher variable cost of thermal power stations, which resulted in backing down of plants. In this case, okay, here again, which type of audit you think was carried out? Audit of government company, rules and orders, compliance, or performance? See, the finding which you see, which type of audit you think would have been performed, means it would have been the outcome of which type of audit. Malu says D, Nitin says E, Ankit says D. I think we've just looked at, yeah, Palvi, Anjali, they are saying D. Nitin says A. Tambeshwari says D. Shrini says D. See, clearly, if you go back, what is missing? Performance, efficiency, effectiveness. Yes or no? Yeah. So that's why here again, what should be the correct answer? Performance audit. Okay. Now, let's look at this third situation. A report was tabled in Parliament highlighting main features of direct taxes administration of the country as mandated in the Constitution of India. This report primarily discussed compliance to the provisions of Income Tax Act and associated rules and procedures, etc., as applied to administration of direct taxes, including irregularities which were noticed in finalizing assessments. Okay, understood? Yeah, so finding is understood. Okay, finding means outcome of the report. Huh? Okay, now, which of the following, now, third question, huh? Which of the following is the most appropriate statement in the context of the report that we have just looked at? Yeah, so there are few statements. You need to comment which statement will be the most appropriate one. Now, whenever you have any such type of question which requires you to look at the most appropriate one, so it may have happened that there are 2, 3 options wherein there is language change. Okay, so therein you need to be very, very careful. You need to find out the most appropriate one. So it's not always about correct or incorrect. It's also about something which is more appropriate. Yeah. Okay. Now, option A, it says it's likely to be a report prepared for submission to President under Article 151 of the Constitution by CAG. Option B, likely to be a report prepared for submission to Prime Minister under Article 151 of Constitution by independent task force of experts. Option C, likely to be a report prepared for submission to President under Article 151 of the Constitution by CBDT. Likely to be a report prepared for submission to Prime Minister under Article 151 of Constitution by CBDT. Now, before you answer this, let me just do one thing. Okay, let me just take you back. Okay, now let me just take you back. It says a report was tabled in the Parliament highlighting main features of direct tax administration. This report discussed compliances to provisions of Income Tax Act as applied to administration of direct taxes, including irregularities. Now, the couple of questions which you need to answer. Okay, why do I say there are a couple of questions? Because the options require you to look into 2 things. One, who should this report be addressed to? Should it go to president or prime minister? I think that's the first question. Yes or no? Yeah, that's the first question. Second, who do you think will be involved in the audit? Will it be CAG or somebody else? Correct? Now, I think as around the government part, we have discussed that the audits or such type of audits are carried out by whom in India? Tell me, in India, who carries out such audits? CAG? Yes or no? So have we discussed anything wherein the audit is performed by CBDT or a panel of experts, etc.? No. Yeah. So I would say just by looking at the option, because this is the only option which says CAG is giving this report. So that's why what should you do? You should eliminate options B, C, and D. Okay. I'm just trying to help you as to how you can choose some of the options, because in this particular question you may have a concern that, sir, do we need to remember article 151? Do we also need to read the constitution? So therein you need to understand that all of these things you can of course read. So there's a very small para which is given in the chapter on this article. But what if you don't remember that? So there is a very simple way. What is that way? CAG is what will do this. Only one option is there which talks about CAG. If there were two options which were talking about CAG, there could have been a confusion. But as of now, there is only one option. Yeah, so that's why I believe this is again a very, very simple option for you to choose. Understood? Yeah. So there again, understood the approach you should follow? Everyone clear? Yeah. Quickly, huh? Everyone clear? Great. All right. So now moving on to next. And I'm hoping that you are answering these without looking at the solutions. Huh? Okay. Now, this D, this next para. Radial Finance Corporation Limited is a government company. Audit of company is conducted by statutory auditors appointed by Comptroller and Auditor General of India, CAG. Okay. So this is the information which is given. So let's try to look into the question. Now it says, who is empowered to conduct supplementary audit in case of a government company? Yeah. Do you even need to look at the options? Tell me quickly. Tell me. It's CAG only. Yes or no? Anjali, Ankit, Nitin, I think everyone is very clear. Nancy, Palvi, they are saying it has to be CAG. Yeah. Malu says it has to be CAG only. Yeah. It can't be anyone else. Understood? Yeah. Okay. Now, moving on to the last part. Bharat Insurance Company Limited is a general insurance government owned company. So here again we are talking about a government company. Statutory auditor is appointed by CAG. Annual report for a particular year also contains comments of statutory auditors on matters such as whether the company has carried out reconciliations in respect of its intercompany balances with other government owned insurance companies. Okay. So you can see there are some matters on which auditor has given comments. Statutory auditor has given comments. Okay. So this is the information which is given. Now, question says, as regards the comments of the auditors which are specified in respect of audit report of above insurance company, which of the following is likely to be most appropriate one? Such are likely to be the comments of test audit. Such are likely to be the comments in respect of directions to statutory auditor by CAG for reporting on specific aspect of their audit work. Such are likely to be the comments of supplementary audit carried out by CAG. Such are likely to be the comments of statutory auditors in accordance with the requirements of auditing standards. Which one out of these four you think will be the right option? Tambeshwari says C. Pallavi, Ankit, I think Tambeshwari, Malu, Bhaskar, they are saying B. Nitin is saying 5B is more appropriate. I won't say 5B is more appropriate. I would say in these options, only one is correct. Remaining cannot be considered to be correct. Remaining, I will not say are correct. Okay. Yes. Though at one point there could be slightly confusion. What is that? Let's try to think about it. Okay. There is no doubt that these comments are given by the statutory. So that's why option A will automatically go away. This is incorrect. Why? Because even if you read the question, you will get to know that option A is not possible, as well as option C is not possible. Why? Because these are the comments of the statutory auditors. So how can you say these are the comments of CAG? Yes or no? No. The point is, if these are the comments of the statutory auditors, why would these comments be provided? Is there any auditing standard which requires these comments to be provided? Tell me. Is there any auditing standard which requires these comments to be provided? Tell me quickly. Tell me quickly, huh? Is there any auditing standard which will require these types of comments? Over to you quickly. Answer is no. Answer is no. Why? Because as per the requirements of auditing standards, you will only give the report, audit report, for which there are going to be various sections. Over and above that, you don't give any comments. Okay, so in this case, if the comments are given, so they are as per the directions of whom? CAG only, because the CAG can require the auditor to provide comments on some specific aspects, some specific areas, any other matter. Yeah. So it appears that has been done in the given situation. So that's why it has to be only B. It cannot be anything else. Correct? Everyone clear on this? Everyone clear on this? Quickly, huh? Everyone clear? Great. So if you are clear, then we'll move further. Okay. Now what I'll do is, even though I'm moving further, but in a way, I'm just continuing on the type of entity that we have already covered. Remember, we covered NGOs. Do you remember? We have covered NGOs, or you have forgotten? Huh? Tell me, over to you quickly. NGOs, remember? We covered? Yeah. In respect of NGOs, you remember we spoke about three types of legal structures? Remember three types of legal structures? Yes or no? What were those? What were those three legal structures? What were those three legal structures? Tell me quickly. For NGOs, there were three legal structures we talked about. What were those? Quickly, waiting for a response. Very good. Dilip says society or a trust or a Section 8 company. Yeah. So now we are continuing on that part. Same as the response from Anjali. Very good. Yeah. So now, very specifically, we are going to discuss about societies. Very specifically, we are going to discuss about trusts. Now, please also remember the fact that the societies that we are now going to discuss are different from cooperative societies. Why? Because these are the one which are in the nature of NGOs. Understood? So you may be thinking, sir, why it's been covered at two places, or why it's not in continuity? Yeah, there's no specific reason for that. But yes, it's not a duplication. Why? Because at first place we covered about NGOs in general, and now we are very specifically covering those legal structures of NGOs one by one. Okay, clear? Great. I think Ankit has the same answer. Now, there are three basic legal forms of charitable entities: trust, section 8 company, and society. Okay. Now, if a charitable institution is formed as a trust, it will be governed by Public Trust Act. However, if no Public Trust Act exists in that particular state, okay, then what will happen? Indian Trust Act 1882 will apply. If it's formed as a society, it will be governed by Society Registration Act. It's formed as a Section 8 company, it will be covered by Companies Act. Okay. However, irrespective of whether it's a public trust or it's a society or a Section 8 company, income tax will apply on every entity. Correct? And in case they are receiving any foreign contributions, means donations, funds from outside India, then the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act will also apply. Yeah, so we are just trying to understand the relevant provisions which could become applicable to these types of entities. Okay, now this part is all about the applicability of acts. Now, moving on to the books of accounts for charitable religious trusts. Now, can you give me some examples of charitable or religious organizations? It could be a temple, it could be a church, it could be say any charitable entity. Yeah, these are all what? They are examples of charitable or religious trusts. Correct? Now, in this case, what is the requirement to maintain books of accounts? So it's like requirement is very generic here. It's not any specific requirement. So what do you have? Cash book, ledger, general. Yeah. Of course, the documents are required to be maintained, copies of bills, invoices, okay, original bills, or any other record, any other book which is required to be maintained in respect of true and fair books of accounts. Yeah. Every year, trust has to prepare financial statements, which will comprise of what? Balance sheet and income and expenditure account. Now, please remember, in case of charitable institutions, we also discussed this in case of NGOs, there will not be a profit and loss account. Can you tell me why? Why there will be no profit and loss account? Tell me quickly. Why there will not be any profit and loss statement in case of NGOs, in case of charitable organizations? Over to you quickly. Why there should not be a statement of P&L? Tell me quickly. Sambeshwari is saying expenses and income account is prepared. I understand. But why a statement of profit and loss is not prepared? Tell me. That's my question. Very good. Shini says because they are set up to serve the society at large. Or in other words, we can say that they are not set up for any profitable purposes. That's what Tambeshwari and Pallavi are saying. Very good. Yeah, I think same is the response from Bhaskar, Nancy. Great. So if you understand this, by default, what will you understand is statement of P&L will not be there. So what will you have? Income and expenditure account. Okay. Now, the format for their financial statements will be prescribed under that respective law. Why? Because Schedule 3 is not there. Okay. Yeah. Now, let's talk about the auditor's responsibility. Now, that's the most important point. Why? Because we are worried more about the auditor's responsibility, not really about what the management is required to do. Yes or no? Yeah. Now, here again, auditor's responsibility. So, in fact, this quite a big para which is currently visible on the screen, which appears to be too technical, isn't it? Which you may not be liking to read, is quite generic in nature. Okay, it's all very generic. Audit requirements in this case are all very, very generic. So let me just read this for you. Auditor should obtain list of books and records. Match this with the books of accounts and the records. Verify the records. Means verification he'll do. Comply with accounting standards and auditing standards. Yeah. Give his report based on professional skill, expertise. Conduct the audit by applying generally accepted auditing procedures. Apply test check. Yeah. Evaluate the internal control procedures. Auditor will have to keep in mind concept of materiality. Yeah. Obtain the evidence on the basis of which he will be conducting the audit. Maintain his working papers. So don't you think that this auditor's responsibility is quite generic in nature, which anyways you will understand? Yes or no? Yes or no? Yeah? Isn't it? Yeah? Such working papers should include his notes on the following. So now about the working papers, you can write a few lines. So what will you have in the working papers? Work done, of course. Explanation and information in respect of that particular area. Decision means the conclusions which would have been reached. Judicial pronouncements means the technical requirements which you would have evaluated as an auditor. Okay. If there are any certificates which are issued by the client or management letters. Yeah. It is important that the auditing working papers prepared and or obtained by the auditor provide evidence that. Okay. So the audit working papers. Yeah. So what are the things which should be included there? Opinion which is expressed by the auditor. In arriving as an opinion, he should give due cognizance to information and explanation which he would have obtained. Information and explanations obtained were full and complete. Means audit evidence is sufficient and appropriate. Remember, auditor did not merely rely upon information or explanation given by the assessee, but he also performed reasonable tests to verify their accuracy and completeness. Obviously, yes or no? Yeah. So these are the things you will have in case of any other audit, isn't it? Tell me quickly. Yes or no? Yeah. Quickly. Any questions so far? So all of these societies and trusts that we are going to discuss, you will find they are going to be very, very generic. So I think Mr. Sainath has a point. Yes, Sainath. So he's asking, what about Tata Trust? I couldn't understand this point. What about Tata Trust? So you will have to check whether that is for social cause or not. The moment you say it's for social cause, of course, whether that is charitable or not. Okay. And of course, every entity is a subject to any other auditor. Okay. Yeah. Trust. Now, auditor has to ascertain. So now what are going to be the audit procedures? Of course, we have talked about quite a lot. But still, let's look at some more points. Whether the accounts are maintained regularly in accordance with provisions of the Act. Whether the receipts and disbursements are properly and correctly shown in the books. Whether the cash balance and vouchers on the date of audit were in agreement with the books of accounts. Whether the books, deeds, accounts, vouchers, other documents, or records produced to him, means whether he was able to get the evidence or not. Okay. Whether a register of movable or immovable properties is maintained. Yeah. So you can see in respect of lot of areas, procedures are being performed. Yeah. And in respect of the procedures, you can just simply write some of the pointers. Correct. So let me just continue on this part. Whether the manager or trustee or any other person required by the auditor to appear before him, whether he appeared or not, did so, and furnished the necessary information which the auditor required, whether any property or funds of the trust were applied for any object or purpose other than the object or purpose of the trust. Obviously. So this is something which auditor will have to check. Amount which is outstanding for more than 1 year. If there are any such long overdues. Amounts which are written off. Okay. Whether any money of public trust has been invested contrary to the provisions of applicable act. Now there are certain provisions of the act basis which the money can be invested only for specified purposes. Remember cooperative societies? Remember cooperative societies? There are some specified purposes. Only for those purposes, money can be invested. Yeah. Similarly, trust can also invest only in specified areas. So whether that was done or not. Now, what are those areas? We don't need to get into that. Okay. All cases of irregular, illegal, improper expenditure or failure or omission to recover monies or other property which is belonging to the trust, or if there is a loss, waste of money or other property thereof, and whether such expenditure, failure, omission, loss or waste was caused in consequence of breach of trust, misapplication, or any other misconduct on the part of the trustees. Yeah. So all of these points are towards what? Constitution of the trust, management of the trust. Yeah. To find out if there are any irregularities in terms of the functioning of the trust. Okay. Whether the maximum and minimum number of trustees is maintained in terms of number. So every time there is a trust. Okay. So trust has a requirement that there should be a minimum number. There should be a maximum number. For example, in a company, there should be a minimum number of directors. Yes or no? Yeah. So the number should not go down beyond that. So same is the case of trustees. Yeah. So all of these things are required to be taken care of by the auditor. Okay. Karan is asking, sir, what do you mean by breach of trust? Breach of trust means when a trust is set up, a trust is formed. So it will always have some purpose. It will have some objectives. Correct? If let's suppose this organization is carrying out some activities which are against those objectives, which are against the purposes for which this organization was set up. Organization means trust. So what do you call it as? Breach. Okay. Means it's not working towards its objective. There's a breach of trust. Clear? Clear on this? Correct? Yeah? I'm just hoping this is clear. Correct? Yeah? All right. So now moving further. Whether the meetings are held regularly as provided in such instrument, whether the minute books of proceedings of meeting. So again, similar to what you see in case of a company. So a trust should also meet up. Yeah, so there should be meeting of trustees. If there is a meeting, whether the minutes are prepared, and if the minutes are prepared, whether they are maintained in an appropriate manner or not. A record of the minutes is required to be kept. Yeah, whether any of the trustees has any interest in the investment of the trust. So it may have happened that trust has invested somewhere. Why? Just to provide some benefit to a particular trustee. Okay, which is inappropriate. Yeah, because who should be benefited at large? Trust, and not one of the trustees. Okay, whether any of the trustees is a debtor or creditor of the trust. Now, this is something again needs to be looked at by the auditor. Whether anonymous donations received are properly accounted for. What is anonymous? Means donations are received, but you don't know where are they coming from. Okay. And the donations in cash are not received by the trust over and above the prescribed limit. So there are some limits. So if the donations are received in cash, it has to be within that limit only. Whether the irregularities pointed out by the auditors in the accounts of previous year, are they still continuing, or whether the trust has taken care of that. Any special matter which auditor may think necessary to bring to the notice of deputy or assistant charity commissioner. Which commissioner is this? Where the trust will be registered. Okay. Yeah. So these are some of the points you can say are going to be relevant in the context of audit of a trust. Okay. Everyone clear? Any questions, any doubts so far? See, as around the trust, there are a lot of points we have covered. Some of the points you may have considered a bit technical, okay, which are very specific to the provisions of the trust. But most of the points are quite generic in nature. Yeah. So every time you don't need to again look into each and every point, okay, or you don't need to memorize all of these points. If at all some of the points you are not able to remember, that's completely okay. Yeah. So don't worry. Don't think that, sir, there's a long list of points. How do we take care of this? Do we need to remember all of these points? No. Okay. Clear? Everyone clear? Nitin seems to be clear. Any questions so far? Any questions? Any doubts? Quickly, huh? Any questions? Any doubts so far? Over to you. Then I'll move further. Tell me quickly, huh? Any questions? Any doubts? No? All right, great. Huh? So now let's move further on to the next type of legal structure. And what is that? Societies. Now, please remember that the societies that we are going to look at now are different from cooperative societies. Okay. So don't just try to mix up the things. If you really want to mix up or maybe link this, you may link this with the NGO or with the points which are there in case of a trust. Why? Because nature of these two types of structures is quite similar. The way they will keep their records, the way they will maintain their accounts is quite similar. Okay. But don't try to link the provisions of cooperative society with that of a society that we are discussing right now. Yeah. That may not be appropriate. Okay. Clear? Now, for the society, we discussed the relevant act is what? Societies Registration Act 1860. or for that particular state, it could be any other applicable state law or act. Now, which is again, we don't know. Yeah. So that's why whenever you will go audit a society, so what do you check? As to how it is registered? Yes or no? You will check its legal structure to begin with. Yeah. Correct. For a company, you will check as to how the company is incorporated, its certificate of incorporation. That is nothing but the registration certificate. So same is the thing you will do in case of society. Yeah. Means how it's formed or whether it's registered or not. Correct. Then the next point is around the objects. So what are the objects of the society? They need to be ascertained. Okay, so I can see this query coming from Ankit. Ankit is asking, sir, charitable institutions use their profit for their own business, like small, medium business, and money earned from that business again, they will deposit in the society account. Not use any other purpose. Can they do that? No, so Ankit, I would say you should not really call this as a profit to begin with. Okay. The moment you talk about a charitable institution, so let's suppose there is a charitable organization, okay, which is, say, it's an old age home. Yeah. So, what is their objective? The objective is what? That senior citizens, or maybe the old, or say, uh, physically handicapped persons, yeah, specially abled persons can come stay over there. Yeah. Now, where do they get the money from? They may be receiving donations, or they may be carrying out some of the activities in house. Yeah. Maybe those persons are involved in manufacturing some goods, articles, which are also sold, from which they may be generating some money. At the same time, this charitable organization will be incurring a lot of expenses. Yeah. They will have staff, they will have admin expenses. Yeah. A lot of other expenses they will incur. So now either they will have a surplus or they will have a deficit. So that's what you'll use the term whenever you'll write this. So either they will have a surplus or there will be a deficit. So it's not profit or loss. Now to answer your question, if let's suppose there's a surplus, so what do they do? See, the money which they are generating, that is for a specified purpose. So that money has to be used for that specified purpose only. Most of the monies which they receive is in the form of donations in most of the cases. Okay, that's how they generate their funds, that's how they get the money. Yeah. But if at all they are involved in, let's suppose, some activities from which they are generating money, that will also be used for the same purposes only. Yeah. So that's how this fund or this surplus or which the money or the donations which they receive are required to be used by them. Okay. So that is going to be the objective, or you can say that's going to be the model, or that's going to be the object for which they will be working. So that is the only thing which they can use their money for. Otherwise, they are not allowed to spend that money for any other purpose. Okay. Yeah. Now, object of the society needs to be ascertained from memorandum, bylaws. Its activities may include charitable, social, cultural, educational. There could be a school, there could be a hospital. Yeah. So it could be anything. Huh? Ascertain whether the society has obtained registration under Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Why? In respect of foreign contributions. Ascertain whether it is also registered under relevant provisions of income tax. Yeah. So why would that be registered? So that it can get exemption of tax in relation to the income. Okay. Obtain an understanding of internal control. Of course, because it will be an organization, it will be carrying out a lot of activities. So there has to be an internal control in respect of a lot of matters, including the financial matters. Yeah. Evaluate the appropriateness of accounting policies. So accounting will have to be done, for which accounting policies will be there. So whether those accounting policies are in line with the generally accepted accounting principles or not. So that evaluation will have to be done. Yeah. In some, in case some expenses are incurred by the society are reimbursed by donors. Ascertain how are those recognized. Means donations which are specific, means which are carried out for a specific purpose. So donation could again be of two types. One which is a specific, second is general, means which could be spent for various purposes. Ascertain if any inquiry has been held by registrar, okay, during the year in respect of any matter. So that should be something over which the auditor should focus on, auditor should be looking at. Ascertain all cases of irregular, illegal, improper expenditure, failure, omission to recover monies or other property which is belonging to the society, or loss, waste of money or other property. Ascertain whether the expenditure or waste was caused in consequence of breach of trust, misapplication of funds, or any other misconduct on the part of the governing body. Governing body, you can say, is similar to the board of directors. Means the body which is governing this entire society, the functioning. Okay, so that is what you call the governing body as. Yeah. So here again, there are a lot of things which the auditor will look at, or there are a lot of points that we have discussed will be looked at by the auditor. But most of these points, what do you find? They are centered around the functioning of the trust or the society. They are around the books of accounts, the records which they are required to maintain, the accounting policies they will follow, the basis they will follow for accounting policies or the accounting requirements. Yes or no? Yeah. So can you see this in respect of most of these things that we have covered? I'm just talking about these trusts, societies. Most of these things are quite generic. Yeah. When I say generic, means something which you can always think of logically. There are no specific provisions which you just need to cram or say mug up. Correct? Yeah. All right. So I think with this, we can just conclude our discussion for today. Happy to have your questions, any doubts. Okay. And we are not yet done. Yeah. So there are a lot of other entities which are pending. So we plan to cover that in the next session. And in the next session, most likely, we should also be able to wind up this particular chapter. Okay. So what are your questions? Any doubts, any questions that you may have? And we are done, so we are through. So if you want to, feel free. If you don't have any section questions, you can just feel free to move on. Thanks everyone for your time, for this wonderful participation once again. Over to you. Any questions, any doubts? No? All right, so then I think we can just close our discussion. All right. Okay, thanks so much. Thanks once again. I think Manish, we can just close this.